This is going to be a little video to explain some of the concepts that you're going to see in week one. You do have many different resources that you can use right in the classroom, but I thought I would do a few extra examples of some of the things that you may see in the first week. So for this little presentation, I have a PowerPoint that I've used in some of my other classes, and I'm going to teach you how to do a couple things, and they're listed here. We're going to learn how to write exponential notation for products, evaluate some exponential notation, simplify expressions using the order of operations, and also learn how to remove parentheses that are within parentheses. So for the first little section, we're going to talk about exponents. When we have a product of the same factor written out multiple times, we can shorten that to an exponential notation. So for example, if I had multiplied the number 3 4 times, so 4 factors of 3, I can shorten that to 3 raised to the 4th power. As you can see, the 3 is called the base and the 4 is called the exponent. So when you see 3 with the little 4, that's called the superscript. That is not 12, but 3 to the 4th like that means 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. So you will be using the factor 3 4 times in a multiplication problem. So here's a few more examples. So 3 to the 4th I had just said, we had just saw. Again, you can either read it 3 to the 4th power or the 4th power of 3. I have another one called 5 cubed. So again, when the power is 3, we call it cubed, or we can also say it's to the 3rd power. Again, that one would mean 5 times 5 times 5. The last one I have on the slide is 7 to the 2nd, which is also called 7 squared, or the 2nd power of 7. And again, that just means 7 times 7. For example, if we want to write our own, I have 5 factors of 10. So again, what we would do with this is we would use 10 as our base. And since I have 5 factors, I would write that with a little superscript of 5, and that is called 10 to the 5th. Again, 5 is called the exponent, and 10 is called the base. We also will learn how to evaluate exponential notation. Many times we need to do this when we have problems that have long decimals. So in order to do that, what we will do is we will rewrite this as a product and then compute the product. So for example, if I want to evaluate 5 to the 4th, one way I can do this is to write out 5 4 times. So again, 5 times 5 times 5 times 5. And when I multiply that all together, I will get 625. You may have a calculator that also does powers. Usually on calculators there are 2 options. One to indicate a power is a little caret sign. It looks like a little arrow, and you would write down the 5, put the little arrow down, and then you put down the 4 and then write enter. Some calculators will have a button called Y to the X, and if you have that button, you would put down the 5, hit that button Y to the X, and then enter the 4, and then press enter, and it should give you the answer. When we're working with exponential notation, you may ask to do different things. You might be asked to write a product in exponential notation. So for example, 2 times 2 times 2 would be written 2 to the 3rd. They may ask you, what does it mean to have a power? So what does 5 to the 2nd mean? That means 5 times 5. Or they may ask you to evaluate. When they say evaluate, that means that they want you to find the actual answer. So if I have 10 squared or 10 to the 2nd, they would want you to find out what that means or what does that equal, and that would be 10 times 10, which is 100. Another thing that you will be doing in week one is learning how to simplify expressions. These are numeric expressions, which means they only have numbers in them, and there is an order of operations that you must follow. Some of you may have learned it in the past called PEMDAS, P-E-M-D-A-S, and that stands for parentheses, exponents, multiplications and divisions, and additions and subtractions. Some of you may have learned this with a little phrase called, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So if you remember that phrase, then you will learn the order of operations. So again, going over the order of operations, number 1, you do everything within parentheses, brackets, and braces first, And if there are multiple ones of these, I will show you what to do, but if you can, you do them left to right. Then you do all exponents, which we have just seen in the last couple slides. After that, multiplications and divisions, you must do them in the same precedence from left to right. So if there's a division on the left and a multiplication on the right, you would do the division first. Then same thing with additions and subtractions. You would do them in order from left to right. So again, if there's a subtraction first on the left, you would do that before the addition. So here's an example, and this is a good one because it does have the division symbol before the multiplication. So again, there are no parentheses or exponents, so you're going to start with your division. Again, the multiplications and divisions go left to right, but the division comes first, so that will be the one on the left. So 16 divided by 8 will give you a 2. That is shown down in the example in red or pink. And once you have that 2, then the other 2 that's left over to multiply by, you will get a 4 for the final answer. All right, here's one that's a little bit more difficult. It has some parentheses. So again, if I'm simplifying 7 times 14 minus the quantity 12 plus 18. So again, by the order of operations, parentheses would go first. So 12 plus 18 would get done first, and you would add that together, and you would get 30. So if you look at the first line, after we carry out the operation inside the parentheses, we still have 7 times 14 minus the 30. Then I still am going with the order of operations. There are no exponents anywhere in the expression, so I would skip that step. Then I would do the multiplications and divisions. There's only one of them, so the next one I would do would be the multiplication of 7 times 14, which would give me a 98. And finally, I'm left with just one operation, which is the subtraction. And after I do the subtraction, I will get 68. So again, I did the parentheses. There was no exponent. Then I did the multiplication and division. It was a multiplication. And lastly, the addition and subtraction, and it was a subtraction. All right, now we have a really complicated one with lots of different expressions. So again, first thing I will do is the parentheses. Now in this one, I have 2 sets of parentheses, and they are not connected. There is just one set of parentheses with a 12 and a 0 in it, and then another set with a 5 minus 2. So they are just side by side. You do them left to right. Everything else would get recopied. So if I look at the second line of the problem, I leave the 7 times the 2, the minus sign, but the first parenthesis, which is 12 plus 0, becomes a 12. Notice after I evaluate the numbers in the parentheses, which is an addition, I take away the parentheses. So when I write the 12 down, leave the parenthesis off. Okay, continuing that line, I still have a divide by 3 and a minus sign, so I copy those down. And then the last parenthesis is 5 minus 2, which is 3. So again, when I evaluate that and get a 3, I will remove the parenthesis. Going to the next line, now if you look at the last one that I have 7 times 2 minus 12 divided by 3 equals 3. So again, there's no exponents to worry about, so I will go on to the multiplication and division step. I do them left to right. I can do them both in the same step, but they go from left to right. So 7 times 2 would be 14, and 12 divided by 3 would be 4. So I can write down the 14 and the 4. The subtraction sign would stay between the 14 and the 4, and the other subtraction sign would stay after the 4 and before the 3. Then I will be doing my subtractions and additions from left to right, and again, these are both subtractions. So I will subtract first 14 minus 4, and that's a 10, and then 10 minus 3 will give me a 7. So again, be very careful when you do your order of operations, making sure in a step you do them left to right. All right, now the last thing that can happen is sometimes there are parentheses that are different shapes. So we have 3 different ones. One is called the parentheses, that are the rounded ones. We also have the ones that are more square, we call them brackets, and then the ones that are kind of curly, and we call them braces. They all have the same meaning, so they all are grouping symbols. You use those when you have them inside of each other. So not to get confused, you would use the parentheses and then the brackets and the braces when they get nested within each other. Unfortunately, if you were doing this in a calculator, if you have a calculator that accepts an expression with parentheses, you cannot use these different symbols. You have to use nested parentheses. So you may have 2 or 3 sets of parentheses in the same problem. But in a problem where you may see it in a math book, they will distinguish and put the different kinds of grouping symbols in one problem. You always start with the innermost parenthesis first. So in this example, again, this looks pretty crazy. If you look through there, there's a set of brackets, there's a set of parentheses, and then there's another set of parentheses on the right. So if I look at the left, I go to the innermost parentheses first. So if I look at just the expression to the left of the division sign, I look inside the brackets and I find that there's a parenthesis. So in that left expression, I will go into the parenthesis and add the 4 plus the 3. So if I look at the next line, 4 plus 3 is 7. So again, if I look at the next line that I've written, you take away the parenthesis, rewrite the sum that you had, which is 7, and inside the bracket, I now have just 25 minus 7 times 3. So again, it got a lot simpler because I was able to remove the first parenthesis. Now I will go to the outside bracket, and inside of the bracket, again, I still have 2 operations. One is a subtraction and one is a multiplication. So again, because of the order of operations, I have to do the multiplication next. So the multiplication will be 7 times 3, which is 21. All right, I'm left now with 2 sets of grouping symbols. One is a set of brackets, one is a set of parentheses. They are side by side, not nested within each other. So you can just do them left to right. So the left one, when you subtract 25 minus the 21, you're going to get a 4. And on the right one, 11 minus 7 also happens to give you a 4. And finally, my last 2 4s will then become a division, and that will give you a 1. This concludes the presentation, so I hope that you are able to learn a little bit more, and again, use the resources that we have in the classroom also, because they're very good and there's some videos there also.